Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony here on the Hill. It's Sunday, June 22nd. We're going to do the astrology for June 22nd to the 28th. Already coming up on the last week of June here, last full week anyway. And there is a packed week ahead, astrologically speaking. We're coming off of the solstice, which just happened on Friday night Pacific time, so Saturday morning, if you're in Europe, etc. But we're just coming off of that. It's only Sunday morning here, so just hours essentially after the solstice. When the solstice happens, it's a pause period. So this is where it's maximum daylight, obviously, in the northern hemisphere, minimum daylight in the southern hemisphere. And there's a several-day pause where the change in daylight hours appears to not change at all. Okay, and that's what we're in right now. So like when this happens during the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the days leading between the solstice and what we call Christmas, that Christmas day is actually the day that the sun starts to rise again on the horizon relative to those in the northern hemisphere. So same thing is happening here in the southern hemisphere. The sun is at its minimum point on the horizon, and it's about to rise here in the next couple days. And when it rises there, and when it starts to fall here, that will be coinciding with a new moon in Cancer. And that new moon is very potent. It's joining Jupiter, sextiling Mars, squaring the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, and it's going to be forming a yod, and there's a couple yods involved in that, which we'll get to in a minute. But first, the idea of this pause that we're in right now with the solstice. So we're at that maximum illumination energy, okay? So we, on an individual level, want to take where we're at now, because there's something that's maximizing, and we want to now infuse this into our world, into our realities here over the coming months. And really this solstice is connected very intimately with the winter solstice coming up in December of 2025, leading into 2026. And a lot has to do with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, as well as the fact that we'll have a full moon in Cancer to be the culmination phase of this new moon in Cancer happening here on the 25th of June. So we'll get to that too. So coming on the heels of this pause, and just before that new moon on the 25th, which is Wednesday, we have Monday and Tuesday, that's tomorrow, and Tuesday, where we're going to have an extended void of course moon. Now, the days leading up to a new moon in general are always what's called a dark moon phase. So it is a time of contemplation. We don't want to start anything until the new moon. The dark moon is more to gather and contemplate before we move forward. And with the Monday and Tuesday, these 2 days leading up to this new moon in particular, coinciding with an extended void of course moon, it makes it extra introspective. It makes it more of a time of pausing. So it's accentuating the pause associated with the solstice, accentuating the introspection associated with the dark moon. And so we have this pause, dark moon, pull-in phase, especially on Monday and Tuesday. And so the void of course moon, if you're not familiar, that is as the moon moves around pretty rapidly through the zodiac, when it makes its last major connection or aspect to other planets, right before it changes signs. That period between that last aspect and that change of signs is known as the void of course period. They can be a couple of minutes long, they can be a few hours long, and in this case it's going to be upwards of 43 plus hours long. So it starts around 1:30 in the morning, Monday morning, so really late Sunday night here on the Pacific coast, and it won't enter the sign of Cancer. So it'll be void of course in Gemini, and it won't enter the sign of Cancer until late on Tuesday, just hours before the new moon. So when it joins the sun and Jupiter for that new moon on Wednesday, okay? And so the last aspect that this moon makes early Monday morning is a square to Mars in Virgo. Okay, so we have moon in Mercury-ruled Gemini squaring Mars in Mercury-ruled Virgo. So this has almost a Mercury retrograde kind of an energy to it. Mercury retrograde is also an introspective, pullback kind of time. So Monday and Tuesday are not the best days to move forward with new plans. Let's put it that way. Great days to contemplate, integrate, and plan for what we might want to do once Wednesday rolls around and that new moon hits. Okay, so extra introspective, extra pause kind of energy happening here to start the week. Okay, so our minds could easily be misdirected, essentially, in that kind of an energy. It's hard to focus and direct our energy. If you think of the moon, when it's connecting to planets, that's kind of its source of focus, its source of direction. So when it's not making any of those aspects, there is loss of direction, loss of focus, okay? So just think of that over the next couple of days. Enjoy the pause, enjoy the introspection, because once Wednesday hits, it's not only a typical new moon where we're planting seeds and starting. Again, this has ripple effects down the line. Anytime there's a new moon in a sign, the full moon in that sign is the culmination phase. So this new moon in Cancer on the 25th here on Wednesday, there's going to be a full moon. I think it's on January 3rd of 2026. And that full moon is going to happen with Mars and Venus both conjunct the sun. Okay? And so we just had a Venus retrograde. We just had a Mars retrograde, where both went retrograded from a fire sign back into a water sign. So we want to move forward, but we had to move back and review some things before we could when it comes to our projects, our relationships, etc. When Venus and Mars are conjunct the sun in early January of next year, coinciding with this full moon, which is the culmination of this new moon coming up this week. So we're looking at the bigger picture. We don't want to isolate the energy in any way. And in that bigger picture, this is all related. That marks the halfway point between the retrogrades. So Venus is going to be halfway between its recent retrograde we just had this spring and its next retrograde, which will be in late of 2026. Mars is also going to be halfway between its retrograde we just had in the winter, this past winter, and its next retrograde, which won't be until 2027. Okay, but very important shift, okay? And that is going to happen just a few weeks, just about 5 or 6 weeks before, about, call it maybe 6 to 7 weeks, something like that. February 20th is when Saturn will make its exact conjunction to Neptune in Aries at 0 degrees Aries, really initiating that starting point of societal evolution and our individual role within it, okay? So early 2026 is really when things get started. It's also a 1 year numerologically, where we're in a 9 year now, we're finishing some things up. But this finishing up phase, similar to the smaller scale of this pause at the solstice with the void of course moon during the dark moon phase, making extra introspective over the next few days, the next several months, 6 to 8 months from now, going into, January, February of next year, these months leading up to that early part of 2026 can also be seen as sort of a preparation and introspective phase on a higher level, okay? So big changes are on the horizon for ourselves personally and collectively, and we're in this process now. So we have this mini tuning over the next few days for this new moon preparation, and the greater tuning over the next several months for that greater initiation in early 2026, as that 1 year initiates, as the full moon in Cancer culminates with Mars and Venus conjunct the sun. They'll all be in Capricorn, opposing that Cancer moon, and then just weeks before Saturn, Neptune conjunct at 0 degrees Aries. So think of it in those bigger terms, okay? Now we bring it back into the smaller phase, okay, of what we're looking at here. So this new moon, Wednesday, joins Jupiter in Cancer, squares the burgeoning Saturn-Neptune conjunction, because they're not in an exact conjunction yet. They're within 1 degree orb, but they're there pretty much in Aries. And there's a sextile to that same Mars in Virgo that the void of course moon on Monday will form the square to and make that void of course situation happen Monday and Tuesday. And that Mars in Virgo is very important then in this new moon, okay? So if we just take that sextile between the new moon, so sun, moon, and Jupiter in Cancer sextiling Mars, there's a slow and deliberate sense of energy with this. Again, speaking to the idea that we're building over the next 6 to 8 months. There's nothing immediate here. That clashes with the square to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Aries wants to go now. Aries is like, let's get it. But Saturn kind of slows that down. Neptune kind of fuzzies it in a way. So we are really concentrating our energies and being more deliberate with how we move forward over the next several months. The rest of 2025, really, into early 2026. And as part of that, there's also Pluto involved. Pluto is actually the apex of a yod. A yod is when there's planets in a sextile to each other, and then on the other side of the zodiac, at the midpoint of that, is a planet that forms the apex of the yod. It's called the finger of God. Okay, it's a fated kind of energy in a lot of ways. And so that sextile between Sun, Moon, Jupiter in Cancer with Mars and Virgo, the other side of the zodiac is Pluto and Aquarius, early degrees of Aquarius. So that's the kind of apex point where things want to funnel into. So that slowness, that deliberateness that we're talking about, we're funneling that into that Pluto and Aquarius energy, which is the greater future, the transformation of society. So what are we doing on an individual level or in the mini collective level for the greater evolution of society? That's what we're focused on here. And again, that's going to last several months into the end of the year. Also, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction Aries that is being squared by that new moon, that is forming a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. And on the other side of that is that same Mars in Virgo. So Mars in Virgo and Pluto in Aquarius are both involved in a yod aspect. There's a double yod happening with the quincux between Mars and Virgo and Pluto in Aquarius, bridging them together. And this one has more to do with that bigger picture focus on where society is going, where we're transforming into more sovereign individuals, where our structure of society is moving from ultimate external authority to internally driven sovereign authority, which if you looked at last week, we had that whole no kings protest, which in reality, I won't talk too much about it, but in reality, anyone going to that really should have put not this king on their signs and not no kings, because if you are truly sovereignly driven internally, internal authority as your driver, then you don't perceive any external authority as your ultimate authority. And so, in other words, there's no concept of kings. If you have a concept of it, it's because you want one, and you might not be happy with the one you have. Okay, we won't get into that anymore. But that is part of what's slowly breaking down over the next several months, because we're going to have to learn how to be more sovereignly driven. So if you still perceive there a need for an ultimate external authority, it's going to be a tough transition. If you've come to the point where you don't need that external authority, this transition's a little bit easier. Okay. So if you feel the need to be protesting against external authority, it might be because you need some inner work to prepare for where we're headed, okay? Which is that sovereign authority. And so this second yod, again, is that focus on that societal transition. And because it's apexing on Mars in Virgo, it is the little day-to-day stuff, the little things we do. So what can we do as individuals to change our habits, to do those little things that make a big difference for that greater process, okay? So what is that little habit I do that can express my sovereignness in society? And how can I catch myself doing things that validate a certain external authority in society? Okay, so it is that kind of puts it on our shoulders to do those things, to focus on that Mars and Virgo. What are those little things I can do to show that I am a sovereign being in this greater society? And again, we don't have to do this overnight. Everything about this energy is this greater months and months ahead going forward. And again, it's when Saturn conjuncts Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, at the Aries point there in February, following this culmination of the full moon in Cancer in early January, with Mars and Venus with the Sun in Capricorn. What can we do during this phase to both, again, focus on the little things while keeping that bigger picture in mind? That's really the big theme that's going on here. So a lot to unpack here. Okay. And in addition, this week, we've got some things happening with Mercury. Mercury's got a few active things going on. So these are all, what we talked about is all bigger picture things happening that we've got to keep in mind. We've got to take our responsibility on a sovereign level to do those small things, to redirect our energy, essentially, in ways that are more productive toward being a sovereign individual in this transforming society, essentially. Okay, so take that pause here that we're in, that void of course here over the next couple of days, really introspect and really think about deliberately how we want to deliberately, very slowly change things in our lives to make ourselves more representative of what's unfolding, okay, and not get lost in the old energy, etc. So again, that that need for ultimate external authority is an old energy. It is, okay? And that temper tantrum of, we don't like this external authority, is an expression of still needing it. Okay, it just is what it is. So on a mental level, we've got an opportunity this week to kind of pave a little bit of a way, because remember, things have to start on a mental level before they can really manifest. I hate that word, but show themselves, express themselves in the real world. And so with Mercury on Tuesday, just before this new moon, this potent new moon that has, again, ripple effects down the line, it's going to square Chiron. So it's Mercury in Cancer squaring Chiron in Aries. Then the day after the new moon on Thursday, Mercury will trine Uranus. So it'll be Mercury in Cancer, sextile Uranus and Taurus. Then at the end of the week, when we get into like Friday, Saturday time period, that's when that Mercury in Cancer will trine the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. So it'll form a trine to both Saturn and then a trine to Neptune in Aries from Leo. So Mercury's going to change signs. It's going to go from Cancer into Leo. It'll form the square to Chiron while it's in Cancer, form the sextile to Uranus while it's in Cancer. Then it'll switch over to Leo and form a trine to Saturn and Neptune. So we got a transition of Mercury this week. And what we're doing really is on a mental level, we're being forced to face, again, this theme has been going on for years with Chiron and Aries, this sense of not feeling capable of operating sovereignly, being codependent, etc. And so it's an opportunity to dig deep and to say, okay, what are these things I cling to that prevent me from being sovereign? That just say like, oh, I'm obligated to this external expectation, etc. And so we can confront that. And then when Mercury sextiles Uranus and Taurus, we have this opportunity to embrace change, to embrace a change to how we approach that, so it doesn't control us anymore. And then the switch over from Mercury from Cancer into Leo, that trine to Saturn-Neptune conjunction is kind of like our primer. Think of it as the primer mentally for where we're headed, being, again, that sovereign being in this changing society that no longer requires ultimate external authority, but instead is driven by internal authority. So we're getting mentally prepared for this transition of this greater energy that's coming over the coming months. But in the meantime, in these next few days, introspect. Don't try to focus your energies too much. Don't try to direct your energies too much. That'll come here on Wednesday, okay? And then going forward for months to come. This is the time to really look at things and say, wow. And it's interesting because we just had, just yesterday, there's now military intervention happening in the Middle East again, right? And one of the things that this Jupiter in Cancer has to do with, because it's squaring Saturn Neptune right now, and this would be a temporary square that's pulling away from itself right now, but because of this new moon, it kind of immortalizes it, at least semi-immortalizes it through the rest of the year into 2026. And part of this coming into sovereign authority is this clash with Jupiter in Cancer, which is our conditioning, right? It's also our tribalizing. Okay, tribalizing has a lot to do with politics, right? Where you tend to tribalize. And what we're going to see over the coming months is, again, people pulling away from their tribes because they're becoming more sovereign. And people operating as more sovereign beings, which can result in retribalizing, but also in a new concept of tribalizing, where there's a maintenance of personal space and boundaries amidst groups, instead of having to eliminate your boundaries to be part of a group. Okay, so there's things breaking down right now. Okay, because obviously there's going to be all kinds of disagreement about what happened or what's happening in the Middle East right now, and there's certain broken promises that have happened as well. So there is a sense of people pulling away from their tribes, pulling into themselves, and so there's going to be more reasons to do that as we move along. So that's just one example. So anyway, busy week, lots of energy, and it's a precursor for what's happening over the many months to come. If you can, enjoy this solstice pause. Really retrospect and introspect here during the void of course moon, the extended void of course moon here on Monday and Tuesday. and focus that energy where you can personally, for how you are going to operate in this transforming world. Okay, so any questions, please let me know. Other than that, enjoy your week and enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk to you next week.